Illness is the night side of life. Everyone who is born holds dual citizenship in the kingdom of the well and in the kingdom of the sick. Although we prefer to use only the good passport, sooner or later, each of us is obliged, at least for a spell, to identify ourselves as citizens of that other place.
If I had to put in one small sentence the key elements of the Institute of Medicine and Humanities, I suppose I would have to begin by saying that it is, in essence, an attempt to bring together the art and science of medicine and the knowledge and the wisdom from the humanities at the points at which they logically interface. I think this does two things for the individuals involved in it, that it broadens everyone's horizons, I think, to study in the humanities, just in a general sense. And more specifically, I would suggest that reading in the humanities also opens new perspectives, provides new understanding to the human condition or of the human condition, particularly and specifically in this instance where it relates to illness.
This is cutting-edge treatment for many types of cancers, but therein lies one of the problems. This type of advance allows us to very accurately treat the disease, but not necessarily treat the patient. And what most technology does for us is advances our treatment of disease, but unfortunately sometimes we leave the patient behind. And what I mean by the patient is we forget about their fears and the kind of psychosocial milieu that they come into us with the disease with.
I think that that the scientific method, when you're dealing with human beings and human situations, can be lethal. When you treat people as if they are machines to be fixed, as objects to put a squirt of oil on to make them run better, and not consider them as human beings who need more than just some kind of a physical fix-it.
Sometimes I wonder whose operation I had. Everybody shook hands with the doctor after it was over. People rushed up to congratulate the surgeon on his skill with the scalpel. There was nothing but praise for the anesthetist, and tributes were paid to all the nurses, interns, and technicians of the efficient hospital staff. Nobody had a word to say to me.
The University of Montana, which is also in our city, has a very, very rich tradition of having an outstanding College of Arts and Sciences, and in particular has really an excellent and wide-ranging faculty in the humanities. And I realized, and a lot of other people, I think, about 4 or 5 years ago realized that there was an interconnect there, because the humanities are about values, the values of humankind over its entire civilization, and as reflected by the philosophies and the literature and the religious studies and the arts and the sciences. And so in a modern 20th century Catholic hospital, the way that values get implemented and played out and used to enrich the work that we do is through the discovery and the application of those humanities lessons. And and certainly not by proselytization and some of the other more historical ways that church-sponsored hospitals have pursued their missions.
There was an interest within the healthcare community, the professionals themselves, to explore the relationship of the humanities to the practice of medicine and making it a much more humane profession. And there was interest on the part of St. Patrick's Hospital, because it is a major provider in this community. And then the university has an interest in that, the faculty members here. One of the primary movers in all of that would have been Dean Jim Fleitner, and then several of the faculty members from the classic, the humanities and philosophy particularly. But the interest went across the board to explore the ways in which it might be possible to change the practice of healthcare delivery in a way that would be more responsive to the needs of the afflicted.
I am far enough, I'm old enough, I've been in this business long enough to be able to remember the day in medicine, in medical education and in medicine, where the focus was strictly on science in terms of training the medical student. And not only was the focus on science in the training for medicine, but the preference for individuals coming into medicine in preparation, in terms of preparation, was that they be trained extensively in biological and physical sciences, leaving very little room, and I'm talking about going back to just after the Second World War, that this movement in medical education came about, leaving very little room for individuals who were coming into medicine, preparing to come into medicine, to make themselves conversant in or know very much about the humanities.
The Institute, from my point of view, is pretty much as the title suggests. It's a project that explores the interface or ways of combining medicine and the humanities, seeking to return some degree of humanness, if you will, to the practice of medicine, and not only the patient's experience of medicine, which I hope is, in a sense, our ultimate goal, but also in almost a preliminarily sense, or start again, also in a precedent sense, if we're going to return humanness to the practice of medicine and the patient's experience, as practitioners, medical professionals, we need to have our own humanity enhanced a bit. And I mean that, of course, we're human when we come to this and we're caring people, but there's something about the modern practice of medicine that seems to not value our humanness as practitioners.
I think that it also helps because we are approaching a time in medicine when we are no longer going to have effective drugs for a variety of different infections. Tuberculosis is probably the most important of those, where there are now strains of tuberculosis that are resistant to all of our conventional medicines. And in that situation, we are indeed having to go back to the old literature to see what treatments were available back before we had effective drugs, because that is what we're going to have to come back to.
Last session, we read stories of sickness, and it's a tough text. But one of the things that was good about it was that Brody talks about the need for doctors to rely on narratives. That is, not just do case histories, but to somehow bring people's stories of sickness, into a narrative framework.
So I'd like to show you my personal connection with AIDS, simply as one way of illuminating how it's impacted on somebody who lives in a middle prevalence area.
Do people die as they live? Is their method of, or their experience of death consistent with how they live?
I think there's a very strong orientation from people who have really been trained in scientific methodology, and when they come to literary texts particularly, they read them as they would a patient, I think. That is, they want a diagnosis. They want the second and third opinions to be as restricted as possible. This is probably, you know, caricaturizing, but I find that there is a kind of mental habit of wanting the diagnosis to finally narrow down to the diagnosis that we'll take action on. And as a teacher of literature, that's the last thing I want to do. I want to simply, you know, there are lots of ways to diagnose, if that's an appropriate metaphor, a text, and let's explore them all.
In doing some of the reading that I have had to do to be part of the reading groups that I've been part of in the Institute, or workshops that we've done, and the related studying and discussion around that, I've been able to get a little bit more of a perspective on the story, if you will, of a person's illness, the illness narrative from the person's perspective. I think the more I, as a physician, can understand the human experience of illness, rather than simply the pathophysiology of illness, the better I can help people live fully with their illness while we're hoping for cure, or in my practice often help them live with chronic and even terminal illness.
And I found reading, particularly The Death of Ivan Ilyich, very powerful and speaking very much to how one might have an opportunity to grow just before dying. Part of the connection, I think, comes not only in reading the literature, but in the discussions that occur in class. That, to me, is one of the most valuable parts about adult education, and a part that the Institute of Medicine and Humanities does so well, is having speakers that are able to engage the participants in lively discussion. And adults bring so much rich experience to any program like this that hearing other people's views is very broadening and enriching.
I think I have attended almost every class that they've offered, and they've all been interesting. Probably my very favorite is one that was one of the earlier programs. It was a course in literature as it pertained to sickness and healing in literature, particularly Russian literature. And I was going to graduate school at the time and was able to take this class for an elective credit for my degree, and I wound up reading over 12,000 pages that quarter. We read Tolstoy and just an awful lot of novels that, you know, you've always heard about, but they sure never came up in any class I ever had, and so I just gobbled those up that quarter. It's one of the best things I remember in my whole life.
The series that I was the most involved in was the Literature and the Plague series that Dr. Wilms ran, which it looked at the influence that plagues had on the development of Western literature, starting as far back as the Greeks and coming up right into the present time. And I found this particularly interesting because of my specialty of infectious disease, where I always had the scientific understanding of what happened, but had no real understanding of what tremendous impact on society those different plagues indeed played. So it brought to me a tremendous insight into a side of disease that I don't usually get exposed to, namely what happens to societies as the result of these kinds of infections.
One of the values, it seems to me, of the Institute here is that it goes beyond those very logical and common sense kinds of approaches about the overlap between medicine and humanities, and asks deeper questions. What is the understanding of the human person among the ancient Greeks, or in the Middle Ages, or among Native Americans? And that kind of pursuit of that kind of line of inquiry has the possibility of more directly challenging both medicine and humanities in a way that I think is profitable for both.
I think one of the most important things that the experience of the Institute does is the experience of being in a class with other healthcare professionals, physicians, physical therapists, other nurses and stuff, is that we talk about important things in a real different context. You don't have the pressures of the workday world. I mean, you can never have any long, meaningful conversation up here at work. There's always something going on, and people need to attend to their business. And just the opportunity to have dialogue about important things with people that you work with in a whole different setting, I think it forever changes your relationship with those people, because you just get to know them in a different way.
We get resistance a bit to more the notion than the specifics of the Institute, simply because physicians firstly may see it as fluff, and that we're just, batting our gums about something that means very little, or really see that it's not possible for them to take on yet another commitment. Another afternoon commitment or an evening commitment seems impossible, and I certainly sympathize with that. My experience is that the investment in time and energy that I put into Institute activities has paid me dividends again and again.
One of the major benefits I've gotten from working with the Institute of Medicine and Humanities has been actually a kind of peripheral benefit, and that was my involvement in the Healthcare Reform Symposium of a couple of years ago. I don't think I would have been ever asked to serve on the executive committee of that if it hadn't been for a few people knowing that I was involved in a kind of loose way with the Institute. And the information that I got out of working for well over a year on that about our healthcare system and about individuals, most of whom were caught in the cogs of a defective system, was very enriching to me as a human, and to learn of solutions that really needed addressing.
There is such an awareness on the part of, I think, the people of this hospital, I mean by that it's medical staff, it's nurses and other practitioners, of the importance of being values-based today in this really turbulent time of healthcare, that they understand rather implicitly then why the offerings that are provided by the Institute of Medicine and the Humanities have some specific relevance to who they are and what they're being asked to do or what their jobs are today. I also think that it has some, although very difficult or impossible to measure, influence on their job satisfaction and on how well we think of ourselves in the work that we do.
The value of it is it does bring to the practice of medicine a side that we don't usually either think about or get exposed to, namely the historical and the social aspect of it. I think that it's made me a more compassionate person. I think it's made me a more well-rounded physician, and I think I do a better job as the result of the kinds of experiences that I've had.
The Ridge Library at the moment is a fantasy that we are going to see come to reality. Several years ago, as a result of a very generous donation, we have been enabled to begin to put together that very specific collection of medical humanities, the interface between medicine and all the humanities disciplines as it appears in books, journals, videotapes, and so on. This type of collection is not available, has not been put together for the most part outside of medical schools, and that puts the closest one to us probably 500 to 550 miles away. So this will give us a really extensive new arena that we can open to the public, to scholars studying the medical humanities, to faculty, to physicians.
I'm fond of using the term that comes out of the early 19th century, late 19th to early 20th century, that the walls of the university really are the boundaries of the state. That we have an obligation to extend the resources of the institution out to assist in whatever ways that we can within the context of available resources.
I would hope, however, that with the opening this spring, this summer of the Ridge Library, and with the acquisition of substantial amounts of textual and media material in the Ridge Library, that the door will be open for a kind of focus on scholarship and research related to this overlap between medicine and humanities, and that this might lead to that area becoming a center of excellence of the University of Montana, and it might allow for individuals from a wide variety of academic disciplines to become involved.
But the other thing that I would really like to see, and this may be pie in the sky, but I would love to see it, is for this to become a model for something that other small communities who do not have access to medical school offerings in these topics, to be able to put together partnerships similar to what we have here in order to create for themselves a way in which to bring locally to each other the same kinds of wonderful experiences that we're having.
As we learn more and more about the human spirit and the human person, we realize that that medical services and even the more global notion of the healing arts is really a good, how do I say this, is really about caring for the whole person physically, socially, psychologically, spiritually, and especially as we are faced with the problems of cost containment in healthcare, especially as we're faced with the issue of unnecessary technological intervention. I think we're going to find the alternatives or the substitutes for some of that kind of healthcare services in the humanities, in the application of spiritual healing, of emotional and psychosocial healing. And the way that we will be able to do that, I think, will be by virtue of our more complete knowledge of the lessons of the humanities.
They work with herbs and penicillin. They work with gentleness and the scalpel. They dig out the cancer, close an incision, and say a prayer to the poverty of the skin. They are not gods, though they would like to be. They are only human, trying to fix up a human.